The biggest challenge, we were fortunate to have a good reaction on the last film, and we knew we didn't want to just go make a sequel for the sake of making a sequel. So we spent a lot of time. That's one of the reasons why we didn't just rush into doing the sequel, is we wanted to make sure that we could do one that matched or preferably outdid the last one. So it was really trying to not just make a sequel, but make one that lived up to the last.
And David?
I think the biggest challenge was, and continues to be, honoring the Trek that came before, but at the same time making it completely and totally accessible to people who have a perceived notion of what that is, both tonally and on a story level, and making the movie fun to watch, but also meaningful, and hopefully we nailed it.
And Carl?
For me, probably the biggest challenge would be working with Chris Pine. No, seriously, no. For me, he's looking. JJ's looking like, what are you doing?
Something was coming.
No, I guess the biggest challenge was to come into this and to not repeat ourselves, to deliver something that was bigger, better, more dynamic, and more character driven, and to be truthful to those characters that everyone fell in love with.
So I imagine speaking Klingon was quite a challenge.
Yes. I think it was learning my lines and saying those big words at JJ speed was the hardest challenge. No, for me, it was waiting 4 years to come back and work with the same people that I've remained friends with, and it was also wondering if we were going to be able to come back. That was it, because we're older now. That's all.
Which way to do my hair was the hardest thing, really. Straight or curly or long with bangs or a sort of a ponytail, or maybe no hair. No, I mean, it was such a sort of whirlwind for me that it was just one sort of ball of excitement from beginning to end. And in all seriousness, that was part of the journey, wasn't it? Establishing the look of him, and yeah.
Okay, and
JJ? It was wonderful.
I think really the biggest challenge for me was Benedict's hair, because there were a lot of challenges in terms of the production, because the movie, the action and set pieces are so enormous, and despite having a healthy budget, the opportunity of to figure out how to make these sequences come to life and look authentic. We didn't want to do a green screen or blue screen movie where it felt like it was people acting in front of nothing and you could feel it and taste it. We wanted to make it feel real. But the biggest challenge, I think, day to day was the tone, was balancing the epic scale, the action, the set pieces with the intimacy, the comedy, the emotion, and that was luckily mitigated by the fact that we have an extraordinary cast, 57 of whom are on stage today.
Let's come to one of those 57. Chris, what was the biggest challenge for this?
I would say, everything's bigger about this film, the spectacle and the story, and if in the first one we got a chance to establish these characters and who they were and kind of paint with more primary colors, this story for each of us, I think, gives us a real chance to explore many different sides of our characters that we didn't get to beforehand. So for me, it was trying to find, for a character who's so kind of genetically self-assured, to find the flip side of that coin and to find the fragility and vulnerability in that kind of man that was exciting and difficult all at the same time. Zachary, stop it.
There's a general kind of challenge for me playing Spock, who is often erroneously assumed to have no emotion, and so to cultivate an inner life and convey actually the fact that there's quite a deep well of emotion in this character is a consistent challenge. But I would say shaving my eyebrows takes the cake. And I got the bangs covered, Benedict, so you didn't have to worry about that.
And Alice, another newcomer.
I suppose my biggest challenge was keeping up with JJ, whose mind moves at warp speed, and that was kind of an amazing experience to watch take place and to be part of. And then in practical terms, turns out I'm a terrible runner on film. So I really had to work on that endlessly on the same day. And JJ used a bit of it, I think, didn't you? Yeah, a bit. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And speaking of running, Simon, hello.
I think as the oldest member of the crew, the challenge for me was remembering to take my arthritis medicine in the morning and insert and remove my catheter, which fortunately had an ally in Alice. We're old friends. Yeah, it's a physically demanding job, and I am 34 now, so it's tough. But I got through it, and I think that shows on screen and here today. Thank you.
And Bob.
Freedom was the biggest challenge. The first movie, we only had one idea, one way to go, to respect canon and to free ourselves from canon. That was the idea that we were going to go with, and there was no other idea. In the second movie, we could do anything we wanted, and that was terrifying and horrible. Freedom is challenging. Freedom is scary. Freedom is your responsibility.
And
that's all I got.
That's good. And Alex.
Vote for Orsi.
I think the biggest challenge was just not, the first movie brought everybody together, and it was so exciting because to watch these people that were so iconic, these characters that were so iconic come together was so great. But the fear I think we had was assuming that just because they came together at the end of the first movie, they were the bridge crew that you knew from the series. And we wanted to make sure that we were tracking the clear evolution of these characters. They had, just because they'd come together, they had not quite gelled yet as a family. And Kirk and Spock in particular were still trying to figure out who they were to each other. And that was a scary challenge, but actually a very exciting one for us.
Well, I thought, yeah, I think it's very easy, not easy, but I think it could have fallen into a stereotype. Like you say, there's a gray area. There's a lot of motivation and reasoning behind what he does, and he has a moral core. He just has a method which is pretty brutal and abhorrent. Maybe not in Bob's new world, but in our world, our democratic world. So I don't know. Yeah, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and I think there's an ability to sympathize and empathize with his cause, maybe not his. Maybe it's not his means of going about getting his ends. I think it was there in the script, though, and it was a beautiful thing to be asked to play this sliding scale of someone who could be trustworthy and understandable, and also somebody who could be out and out on a mission of revenge and trying to bring about what he sees as justice and a change in the order of, a change in the order of authority, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I think that was one of the brilliant balances, I think, that was achieved in the script. That you oscillate between, in the same way as you should, because you're going with Kirk's journey on it, you should be able to move between sort of abhorring him and feeling something for him.
I think that not only am I grateful to the writers for writing a script that celebrates and exploits ambiguity and allows the bad guy to live in a place that is compelling and not entirely clear and certainly not one note. I'm also very grateful to the writers, notably Damon, who said you should check out Sherlock, which I had not done. And when we were casting this part, it was the perfect medicine for what we were suffering from, which was not really being able to figure out who was someone who inspired us in the way that we needed. And when I saw Sherlock and was, of course, blown away, and then called Benedict and we spoke, and Benedict famously, I suppose, auditioned on an iPhone. And when we watched that video, it was 100% clear we found our man. And working with Benedict, frankly, exceeded all expectations. And I think that everyone sort of felt on the set there was a kind of everyone sort of, I think, stood a little bit taller when he was around, and it was a kind of a wonderful way to take advantage of what the story was, because this was a very intimidating figure. Well, the first thing I did when I was asked if I was interested was call Damon, Bob, and Alex and said, do you want to do this with me? Because I was not a Star Trek fan, but I was very intrigued by the idea of creating a version of Star Trek that would appeal to me and people who were fans of adventure and fans of movies. Luckily, those three are significant Star Trek fans, and it was immediately the beginning of the conversations with us and Brian Burke just was among the most fun, professional experiences ever, and was really one of the reasons why doing a sequel appealed to me so much, the idea of working with them and the crew and the cast again.
I sat down because I got an email. I got an email from JJ. I'd landed on a flight from New York, and I opened my phone, and the first email that popped up was from JJ, and it just said, "Do you want to play Scotty?" And I was totally aware of the project, and I was very excited about it. And I thought, "Oh, great, JJ's doing Star Trek. This will be great." I didn't, for a second, expect to be involved. So when I got that very straightforward, blunt kind of request, I literally sat down and asked the plane to take off again, so I could think about it. I was worried. To be honest, I was a little bit like, oh, what do I say? I can't just say yes. It feels like we should have some romance, some kind of. There should be some sort of. Can I be on tape or something? Or maybe we could go out for dinner and have a movie, and then I might say yes. You never know. And I felt like such a slut, just going yes. So I took like 3 days of pretending to think about it, and then JJ said, I remember very clearly JJ said, because I was like, wow, this is such a huge commitment, and is it going to be like, are we going to be doing this for such a long time? And JJ said, the worst thing that can happen is that every couple of years we get to spend some time together and have a lot of fun, and it was just a no-brainer from that point.
Ours was a little bit more romantic. JJ phoned me up and gave me a preamble. For a good 20 minutes, I had to pull over and ask me if I was committed and if I was interested in Star Trek and if I understood what the costumes were and I understood what the requirements were. And I said yes to all of it. And then I didn't still know if he was asking me if I'd like to be part of it or if he just wanted to tell me what he was going to go and do. And so I said, I'm sorry, are you offering me this film? And he goes, yeah, I think that's what's happening, yeah. And I said, all right then. I said, thanks, Simon. I said, thanks very much. And then I went home and I saw my brother, who I'd tired from making him run these lines with me, and I just went like that. Probably one of the cooler moments.
I reached out to a friend of mine. I have a good friend from college who has been in his life to no less than 50 Star Trek conventions, who is now my business partner, actually, so that worked out. And I asked him to compile for me a booklet of information on the history of Vulcans and the life of Spock and the family tree. And we began to enter into a session of tutorials, which lasted only until the time when it was announced that I was going to play Spock, which was maybe another month and a half or 2 months later. And that's the first time that I met Leonard Nimoy. And then I fired my first tutor in favor of the second, who has subsequently become someone who's enormously important in my life, both personally and creatively. So
fantastic.
He usurped that position.
I don't remember what I did, but what I do remember is that when I auditioned for JJ, I wasn't all that, I had auditioned for it and didn't get it, and then was called back in and was a little less enthused, probably because my ego was burned. But I do remember going into the room with JJ, and it's the most vulnerable position an actor can be in, is going into a room and you're basically selling your wares and seeing if people like you. And it was such a comfortable room, and it was so much fun, and it had been such a long time, I remember, since an audition had been fun and not terrifying. And And I thought, if the audition could be this much fun, I can't imagine what actually making the thing is going to be like. And any kind of trepidation or anxiety I had about the role or the franchise kind of disappeared completely. And I think it was really due to what JJ brings to it and what we've been talking about going around with this film, is that it not only is it for the fans, it's this whole different energy for non-fans alike. And it's for fans of adventure and for action, for thriller and for romance and for, all these different kind of colors that I think just the term science fiction can sometimes alienate or make people feel alienated from. So that was, I was just excited by the excitement in the room.
Well, I got an email, a little bit like Alice, I didn't pick up on the signals. The email said, do you want to come and play? And I went, what, squash or tennis or some kind of racket-based activity? And the penny slowly dropped, and then I fell asleep. Because it was about 2 in the morning or something ridiculous. And it had been so frenzied over Christmas getting myself on tape, and I'd done it, and it had taken a day to compress this little file, because iPhones are quite cool and taken a lot of information now. And once that had all been done, and I sort of breathlessly sat back and went, and I got a note back saying, JJ's on holiday. So it's fine, he has to have a rest sometime, but I just didn't get the tape in time before the holiday. So I waited and tried to forget about it. So it was the most thrilling news. I was just over the moon, and I was a huge fan of the first film for every reason that Chris has just kind of reminded us of what the strengths of it were and what the strengths of this one are. It's just such a rich experience to be in his hands and storyteller's hands, where you're taken on a journey of high emotion, comedy, adventure, romance, and comedy, and then back through all that again. I mean, it's I knew it would be a riot, so I was well over the moon.
My first reaction was, I was shooting Avatar, and I was really into it, and I got the call from my agent that JJ wanted me to come in and read for this role because he was going to direct Star Trek, and my first reaction was like, why? And obviously being of the generation of Star Wars, I look at my mom and what Star Trek represented was just, it was what my old people used to watch. And I knew very little about the show. And then I read my lines, and I remember everybody kept telling me, he's really excited to meet you, and that made me very nervous. And I came in, I read my scene once, and he told me, I don't need to hear anything else. And I was like, oh my God, I tanked this. He is going to ask me to leave, security's gonna walk me out, I'm never gonna read for him again. And then 2 days later, James Cameron tells me I'm on set, and he goes, I have a surprise for you. And I look, over there, like on the set, and JJ is visiting the set. And I felt so happy and humbled, and I thought, well, then I must have booked the part. And then obviously that was the beginning of me sitting down with my mom and picking her brain in terms of what Star Trek really is and what it represented to her and people, everybody that is devoted to the show. And I gained so much respect, and I'm utterly excited and blessed to be here with everybody.
I found out relatively quickly, I guess. I met with JJ, and I thought that the meeting went horrible. Absolutely terribly, because I asked JJ asked me, he said, do you have any questions? And I said, yeah, what's the story? He goes, I can't tell you. And I said, well, I guess I've got no questions. So I walked out of our initial meeting thinking, well, that was fun. I'm never going to see this guy again. And then he invited me to test for the Roller Bones, and so I went into this reading, and I read for it, and I remember getting halfway through, and JJ's laughing. And it threw me, because I hadn't done theatre for quite a while, and I'm thinking, what the heck's he laughing at? And then it sort of clicked. And then at the end of the take, I distinctly remember JJ going, oh my gosh, that's it, that's Bones. So I walked out of there sort of with a pretty good sense that it went well, and then, I mean, literally within the space of, I think it was about maybe an hour and a half, we got the word back that the role was on offer to me. And I remember being completely thrilled, elated, excited, and then just the most terrifying horror came over me that now I was actually going to have to deliver this and figure out how to make it work, because, you know, unlike many of these, Simon excluded, I mean, these cast members, I was actually, you know, a huge fan of the original show. So, yeah, for me, I guess it was like, you know, I was elated and then absolutely terrified.
I smuggled back the entire Enterprise piece by piece and rebuilt it in my garden. No, on the first film, we were like every day we'd hand back our badge and our I have a Starfleet ring, communicator phaser, that whole thing. You'd hand it in to an armed man at the end of the day before you could leave the set. It was all very, you know. This one, I stole my badge. Yeah. Yeah, what are you going to do? Huh? It was on my costume when I got back to my trailer, and it's a beautiful little brass thing. I'll bring it in the next time, JJ. And I put it in my bag. The production design on this film is extraordinary. It's so detailed and beautiful, and every prop is like a wonderful toy. I got to carry a phaser this time, and you know, that was like a dream come true. And if I could have stolen that, I would have. But I was wrestled to the ground by a large woman. And so it swings and roundabouts. Yeah, if I could steal anything, I would. But they won't let me.
I would have loved to have kept my script, and then I found out on the last day of shooting we actually had to give our script back to maintain secrecy. I kept a leather jacket that I wore from the first film, from the bar scene, that I was a big fan of.
During the first movie, similar to having to hand in our accessories at the end of the day, we would also cut up every pair of ears that I wore and throw them into the garbage, which I felt was just so wasteful. So in the second movie, I asked politely and kindly if I could preserve a couple for my own collection of ephemera, which I did. So I have a couple pairs of ears. In particular, one pair that I wore during the fight scene that we had on the trash barge, which is speckled with green blood.
Half my family's Scottish. I've married a Glaswegian in Glasgow, and I have a huge critical band of Scots who, even Maureen was on the set with me on the first film as well. But I worked hard on the accent for the second film, harder in fact. I managed to get on the phrase "Hod on we man," which was especially for my wife, which I say to Chekhov. And my father-in-law bought me that book, The Patter, you know, which is full of those wonderful colloquialisms like "you wee scanner" and "I'm stooting a boot" and all that kind of stuff. Although JJ would sometimes quell those urges to say things which are completely, you know, ununderstandable to anyone that isn't in East Kilbride. So yeah, it's something that I want to get right, and something that is always, actually the Scottish reaction to it's been lovely. People that go, "Your accent's not very good," are usually English, which is telling. But in terms of Scottish independence, Scotty would absolutely boldly go, why should Scotland suffer under a government that England has voted for? I think it's ridiculous. And for years, Scotland, which is predominantly a Labour voting country, has had to languish under Conservative governments, which they didn't vote for, didn't ask for. So, independence now! Freedom!
For me, I guess it's twofold. One is Bones's altruism. There's nothing that he wouldn't do for his friends, and secondly, it's I guess the fact that it's wrapped up in the most cantankerous layer that seems to permeate many of his interactions. But that's what I love about him.
For Uhura, I think it's how she is so reliable and responsible and elegant. Kind of reminds me of like a horse, like a very beautiful stallion. And that's sort of what I wish it can rub off on me from her.
Harrison's sense of honor to his own, the idea of what family is and the importance of being protective of your tribe.
My character, I like Kirk's, I don't know if there's a word, underdoggedness.
Nope.
No,
Nope.
no, not a word. I like
One more
Kirk's,
time, this time with words that make sense.
his orneriness. Yes.
All right.
Right? All right. Yeah, I like. There are many things about Kirk I like. I like the fact that, under great pressure, he's always getting beaten down, especially in the second one. That he's a fighter, and it may not always work out. It may not always be the best choice, but I can appreciate a guy that even when he's knocked down, especially in that scene on Kronos when Benedict and I are fighting, I like this guy who's just exhausted, but just giving it all he's got. I'm done.
Done?
Yeah, sorry.
I value Spock's compassion, his faith in humanity, his measured expression as well, that he's not irrational, and that ultimately he's true to himself.
I like Carol Marcus's fierce intelligence, which she's clearly so distracted by that she will even change in public.
It happens. I like Scotty's just kind of like a fiercely intelligent mechanic, and I think if he was in a perfect world, he'd just tinker with the warp core all day. So when things go crazy, he always reacts like, "What the?" He's kind of always shocked and amazed by everything, and doesn't really take it in his stride. And I like playing that because it's how you would react to a Klingon on your starboard bow, and it's fun to be kind of the everyman of the crew. Scotty is constantly amazed by his predicaments, and that's fun to play.
I always try to avoid going on the internet. I think it's best to try and start with a blank canvas. And if you're in the sort of expert hands that I've been fortunate enough to work with and be employed by, a lot of trust goes to those people. So whether it's Mark and Stephen rebooting Sherlock and giving a modern-day twist to a much-loved Victorian hero, it sounds like a cheesy spin-off idea, and yet in those fanboys' hands, it's done with such authenticity and respect for the canon, in the same way that I think Star Trek has been done, that that takes a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And beyond that, yes, it's just to try and imagine that you are, rather like when you're auditioning, I try to imagine I'm the only person they're seeing that day, because it can be overwhelming in the same sense as it can be overwhelming if you try to fulfill everyone's expectations rather than the people nearest to you in the creative process, be it your director and fellow actors and writers. So, that's kind of it. I try to trick myself into believing that no one has ever gone there before. No, it didn't cause me a problem going back. But yeah, beyond the bangs or how I was going to wear my hair, that was the hardest thing, in all honesty, because it meant an awful lot of eating in a very short space of time and a lot of working out. But fortunately, I had a fantastic trainer in the shape of Mr. Munro, otherwise known as Peanut, who's also trained Mr. Tom Hardy, who's known to get quite big. And we worked together. We'd known each other through Tom on Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So that was a lovely thing, but a lot of hard work. And yet I really enjoyed it. I'd never been asked to before. It was very integral to the character. I had to have a strong physical shape and presence and be able to move at the same time. So I couldn't just be a stiff lump of muscle. I had to be able to kind of stretch and fling my arms and legs about a bit. And I loved all of that. I really, really enjoyed it. Although there was one stage where I ate about 4,000 calories a day and then carb depleted. This is so boring. I can't believe I'm saying this. And it's horrible. You turn into an absolute creature from hell because all the fuel you've been relying on to kind of get you through the workout disappears, and it's all about going whoop around the muscle. And it's just horrible, I know how girls feel. Diets are shite. But the workout was fun, and God, the amount of live action that this man lets us do and wants us to do, it's part of the visual thrill. We have the most amazing, amazing people who build this world around us in SFX and post, but we're asked to do an awful lot of work in front of it beforehand. So you get the joy of seeing real bodies in these incredible environments, and yeah, I enjoyed it. Chicken. I had a lot of chicken. Chicken, all sorts of chicken. And salmon and... Christ, I don't know. Are you from a food program? Right, oh, you are, right, okay. God, that took me a long time to work out. Christ, so I was playing Sherlock until midnight last night, so my powers of deduction are a bit sleepy this morning. I would say yes, and protein shakes, but we tried to keep it normal, food-based, carb and protein, and, and chicken. And I can't think what else I ate. Can you remember what I ate? I had a lot of what these guys ate, because I suddenly discovered they were walking on set with these beautiful little bags with sort of pre-made meals. I thought, where did you get one of those? Oh, that's a dietitian. Oh, okay, can I have a dietitian? Yeah. Oh, okay, so I don't have to eat chicken and then more chicken, just because I was for like 2 weeks eating chicken, potatoes, and broccoli.
When I was a kid and saw Star Wars for the first time, it blew my mind. Around the same time, I had friends who were huge fans of Star Trek, and I don't know if I was smart enough to get it or patient enough. What I loved about Star Wars was the visceral energy of it, the clarity of it, the kind of innocence and big heart of it. Star Trek always felt a little bit more sophisticated and philosophical, debating moral dilemmas and things that were theoretically interesting, but for some reason I couldn't get on board. And it really took working with all these guys and actually working on Star Trek for me to fall in love with that. So my hope was, and certainly I think all of our hope was, that we could take the integrity, the spirit with which Roddenberry created Star Trek, don't throw away the critical stuff, the characters, those archetypes, the dynamic between the characters, and aspects of what it is to travel and explore and come up against, in the case certainly of Benedict's character, some incredibly insidious and unspeakable evil. But the key was to also infuse it with this kind of energy and pace and action adventure, so that the movie has both the balance of both. And this is what I think Damon was referring to earlier: the action and thrills, but also what Star Trek was in its early days, in the stuff that Zoe's mother loved. And in terms of Star Wars, it's early days and going forward, but obviously it's a completely different universe and feels like a very, very different tone and history and characters, and I don't feel that there's much of a overlap Venn diagram of the two.
That, they were just
do it in the voice of the 10-year-old.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
Gosh, how you've grown. You had nothing to worry about. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I mean, that's a great question. That would take too long to think about it to come up with a good answer. But pretty chuffed, I think. I mean, what was I doing when I was 10? Yeah, I was probably playing Anne in Half a Sixpence at school at that time. So the idea of being in a Star Trek film was probably very far from Anne's mind. I think he was just very worried about, that it gets confusing when you're constantly playing girls at that age. That bangs a tale. I think he would have been really, really surprised and wouldn't quite have believed it.